We couldn't say Bell Station, it was already.
Well, don't go halfway.
Okay. All right, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy that there's a decent turnout today. It's a beautiful day, so I hope everybody stays and enjoys the park afterwards. Today we have author and historian Mark Zimmerman. This is his second trip up here. We're happy to have him. He has written 8 books, 4 of them being over the Civil War. Today he's going to be talking about Fortress Nashville. He is a member of American Battlefield Trust, the Battle of Nashville Trust, the National Civil War Roundtable, Save the Franklin Battlefield, the Civil War Fortification Study Group, and the Tennessee Squires Association. So I'm going to turn it over to him because he knows a lot more about this than I do.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Beautiful morning here. I want to thank Roxanne and Fort Defiance for having me again. And we got a pretty good crowd here, so that's great. What we're going to do today is talk about Fortress Nashville. And we're going to know what happened to the music. Play it the first time. I haven't had music before, so anyway, this presentation is based on the book Fortress Nashville. I was very proud that the book was named one of the top 10 books of 2022 by Civil War Books and Authors. I have some available here, be glad to sign them. Much more information on my website listed here, along with my other Civil War books. And there's even some freebies up there that history buffs might like to look at, just for the heck of it. So let's get started. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and this, of course, is going to be mostly about Nashville. I always like to say that Nashville, during the Civil War, was 3 separate periods. The first one was the capture of Nashville. The second one was a federal occupation where they built all the forts and the infrastructure. And then the third one was Hood's 1864 invasion, which culminated in the Battle of Nashville. We're going to be mostly talking about the second period there, although first we're going to start out with the building of the river forts. And of course, we're sitting in one right now, right over there. This is a very simple map at the beginning of the war. The red dots are the Confederate forts on the rivers, of course the Cumberland and the Tennessee, and then the 2 Union forts up there, Fort Anderson and Fort Smith at Paducah and Smithland. Work on these forts progressed very slowly for several reasons: lack of labor. There was slow progress because of indecision over siting, changes in command, other priorities. Of course, the Davis administration prioritized the Eastern Theater in the Western Theater, which is where we are. The Mississippi River got that priority. And this gentleman down here is Albert Sidney Johnston. He believed that the forts were formidable because he never visited them in person, and he also believed that the ironclad gunboats were nearly invincible, which they certainly weren't. The poor sighting, mostly of Fort Henry, was due to Kentucky neutrality, confusion, again, transition, and the widespread belief that the war would only last 90 days, that it would be over by the end of summer. I am a little embarrassed to say that I haven't pulled my notes out yet, which I will do here quickly. And I have some things to read from here. This is Fort Hyman across the river from Tennessee River from Fort Henry, which is here in the background. Had a commanding view of Fort Henry, but it was not finished at the time of the battle. So here we see the Confederate soldiers abandoning Fort Hyman to go over to Fort Henry. If they had big guns there, it might have been a different outcome. This is the Battle of Fort Henry. Formidable fort, very elaborate fort. Unfortunately, it was sited right at water level. During the battle, 1/3 of it was underwater. It was mostly a holding action. Most of the garrison had already marched overland 12 miles to Fort Donelson. And you can see in the river there, we're looking northward, downriver. You can see the ironclad gunboats there, the federal gunboats, engaging at point blank range. And of course, the battle lasted about an hour, and the Federals captured the fort, which led a couple of weeks later to Fort Donelson on the Tennessee River. And here you can see the upper and lower gun batteries. There was snow on the ground, very little trees left standing. And again, you can see 4 federal ironclads there engaging. Fort Donelson, they had plunging fire onto the boats. They disabled them, and they could not be controlled, and they just basically floated back downriver out of range. The Confederates actually won that naval battle. That was on Valentine's Day. They were exchanging iron valentines. The fort was surrendered, however, and at 2 a.m. on February 16th, 1862, Confederate General John Floyd telegraphed his superior, Major General Albert Sidney Johnston, in Nashville, that he had defeated U.S. Grant at Fort Donelson. 3 hours later, Johnston was awakened from his sleep by a messenger who told him that Floyd and the other Confederate generals had agreed to surrender Fort Donelson and then fled for their lives. That of course, was followed by the gunboats going up the Cumberland River. Here you can see a drawing of Clarksville at the time, Fort Defiance on top of the bluff, the white flag flying from it, and Confederate cavalry on the riverbanks there watching. This is the USS Currow. There's a beautiful model of this gunboat in the displays. And the USS Conestoga. There's actually a diorama right there that pictures that exact same scene. And I want to just say that I am blown away by the quality of the exhibits here. It's just first rate. Here we have a kind of a scorecard for the Confederate forts. As you can see, most of them were abandoned, preempted. Fort Gilmer in Nashville was never built. Jeremy Gilmer, who sited this fort here, was sent to Nashville to erect forts and never got around to it. His heart just wasn't in it, and didn't have enough time, didn't have enough labor. And then Grant, when Fort Donelson was taken, the Confederates on the Mississippi at Columbus were outflanked, so they had to retreat from Columbus. And when they did that, Grant took Paducah and Smithland at the mouths of the river, which was a very critical and very smart move on his part. Confederate soldiers erected Fort Zollicoffer 6 miles below Nashville on a high bluff, 130 feet above the river, boasting 8 heavy guns. One was a 6-inch rifle weighing 9,500 pounds, made at the Tredegar Iron Works in Richmond. Another one was a 6-pounder made by Ellis & Company of Nashville. The fort was named for General Felix Zollicoffer, who was a Nashville newspaper editor, a Whig politician, and the Confederate commander who was killed at the Battle of Mill Springs in Kentucky, far on up the Cumberland River in January of 1862. On the sunny morning of Tuesday, February 25th, the federal gunboat sighted the guns of Fort Zollicoffer on top of the cliff. A landing party of Colonel Jacob Amin's 36th Indiana found the fort smoldering and totally in shambles. That fort had been abandoned also. So now we're going to talk about the Nashville forts. Fortress Nashville, the capture of Nashville and federal occupation allowed the Stones River, the Tullahoma campaigns, Chickamauga, and the capture of Chattanooga. And then, of course, Sherman's capture of Atlanta. And then also in 1864, the repulse of Hood's invasion. Shortly after the city's capture, Union forces placed batteries at barricades controlling the 8 turnpikes into the city. The guns were placed so that they could be easily turned around and face the city in case of a civilian uprising. The fortified railroad bridge and state capitol each were supplied with 4 artillery pieces and 6 companies of infantry. The building at the corner of Broad and Spruce garrisoned 2 infantry companies and included 1 cavalry regiment and 1 battery of horse artillery. I don't know how well you all know Nashville, but that was basically a little bit above where Bridgestone Arena is now. Here you have King Andrew, military governor Andrew Johnson, lived at the newly erected Tennessee State Capitol. You can see, if you squint, you can see some earthworks, timber works, cotton bales. It was fortified. The governor was paranoid about being captured by Confederate cavalry or guerrillas and put on trial and that whole thing, but which of course never happened. Here's and I wish the screen was bigger, but here we have a beautiful sketch of the 16th Illinois Regiment in camp across the Cumberland River from Nashville in Edgefield. You can see the fortified railroad bridge there, a couple of gunboats on the river. The state capitol is way above there on Campbell's Hill. And this pointer doesn't really work too well on the screen, but to me, the important thing is that right here, there's a 2-gun battery overlooking the bridge, protecting it. Here's a wartime picture of the Louisville and Nashville Railroad Bridge over the Cumberland River. You can see it's been planked so that infantry and artillery can use it. If you look real carefully, you can see a caboose way down at the end. It has heavy oak swinging doors and siding and turrets with gun ports in it so that it can be protected. You can see this, again, the state capitol in the distance. And the structure in the river is it's a swing open bridge, and that's where one end of the bridge is anchored when it's open. Here we have, again, I wish it was bigger, but we have a 1860 map of Nashville, and I've drawn on their 1864 superstructure. You don't have a pointer, do you? Like a stick or a pointer?
Well, I got a ruler.
Here's Fort Negley, Fort Morton. Here's a big railroad depot, University of Nashville buildings. Here's the gunpowder magazine. Here's the Nashville and Chattanooga Railroad Depot, the L&N Railroad Depot, the Nashville and Decatur Depot, and here's Broad Street. And here's the main wharf where all the steamboats come, and the warehouses are there. And they had 2 other wharfs which were much smaller, upriver and downriver, pontoon bridge. Here's the state capitol. Here's the railroad that goes west up to Johnsonville Depot, state prison, and field hospital. Downtown is this area right here. And also wanted to show you and highlight Smoky Row, which is where the soldiers recreated. A lot of gambling, a lot of drinking, and frequenting of houses of ill repute. Notorious, and I couldn't help but overlay that section on a modern map of Nashville, and if you know anything about it, this is where all the law offices are, the attorneys. So
It makes perfect sense.
I don't know if that's
That's appropriate. Yeah.
Downtown Nashville housed 25 hospitals converted from schools, churches, mercantile, and other buildings. Hospital buildings were whitewashed with lime around the foundations to prevent contagion. The Cumberland Field Hospital, about a mile west of the Capitol, included 30 acres and contained 384 floor tents. That's over 2,300 beds. The hospital also included 21 frame buildings. And I mention this to emphasize the extent that the federal military went of building up Nashville. It's just incredible the amount of engineering and work that they did. Here is a wartime map of Nashville showing the inner and the outer defense works. Of course, here's the town. Fort Negley, which still stands, of course, and all the other forts along the way, and all of these numbers are artillery batteries, major artillery batteries. And then you can see that it runs from a curve in the river to the other curve in the river. And then over there is the probable site of where Fort Zollicoffer was. We're not sure exactly where it was. There's nothing that remains. Here you can see right here is Belmont Mansion. Give you a little bit of bearings there. Here's another map, an aerial modern map of Nashville showing the works. And that, of course, was where the town was. And then right here is Centennial Park with the pond, the railroad with the gap in the works. Here's the Belmont Mansion. There's the I-440, and here's the railroads coming in. And here's one more map showing the distances between the forts. Those on the left are in miles, these down here are in yards, and then those red dots are the artillery batteries. So you can see that the town was pretty heavily covered by forts, except maybe for this area right up in here. And I reckon that that's the case because there were gunboats on the river that could cover that area quite easily. And then here's the railroad bridge, and we'll be talking about where this railroad redoubt is out here on the L&N Railroad. And of course, Fort Johnson, which is the state capital. This is a very interesting photo from the state capitol. It's from the northwest corner looking southeast. And this area here would be the state Supreme Court building today. Here's these beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous lampposts that no longer exist. Big guns covered with tarps because of the rain. And I believe that this is Polk Place, where President Polk lived and his widow lived during the Civil War. And then here is, you just see the Nashville-Chattanooga Railroad Depot right down here. The interesting thing about this photograph is that right there you can very distinctly see, you may not be able to, but you can distinctly see the outline of Fort Negley there. You can see the trees growing inside of it, and you can see the casemate and the flagpole and everything. You can also see Blockhouse Casino, which is on Kirkpatrick Hill across from Franklin Pike. And then you can also just barely make out the outlines of Fort Morton right there. We'll get a little bit more into these forts coming up. This is a wartime view from Fort Negley looking across Franklin Pike up to Blockhouse Casino on Kirkpatrick Hill. That is where the water reservoir is today. And then right here, running here, is Franklin Pike. You can see all the plank sheds that the soldiers encamped in. All of these dark places are not tree stumps, they're limestone chimneys that have been abandoned from these little huts. And then you can also see, if you look real close, you can see this is dug out here to quite a depth, and behind it is built up fortifications, and in front of it are sharpened spikes angled towards the enemy. Quite a field fortification there. And that was the inner line of defense. This is the outer line of defense, which you can see kind of arching there. And again, ditches, fortifications. These soldiers, I guess, preferred tents to live in. But these were taken about the time of the Battle of Nashville. We're going to talk about Fort Negley, which is sacred and irreplaceable. It is not only a Civil War site, but it's a civil rights site. It's one of the 4 sites in the United States on UNESCO's Slave Route Project. Fort Negley is interpreted as ruins Believe it or not, it takes a lot of money and a lot of work to preserve ruins. It's been closed for most of this year as they've been stabilizing some of the stone. It might be closed for a good part of this year as they continue work. I think they got a new grant to work on it some more. It's a $2 million project funded by the city. They're using modern techniques, these historic masons, to enhance the stability and longevity of the stoneworks there. They're trying to use as much stone as possible. Stone that they can't use, they're going to use elsewhere on the site. And once it's done, visitors will be able to tell which parts have been rebuilt and which parts haven't. This is a couple of pictures I took 20 years ago where they were rebuilding the bastions, and you can see the amount of stonework there that's been removed and will need to be replaced. And it's not just a matter of stacking stones, it's really intricate work. Here is a sketch made by a soldier during the war of Fort Negley. This is the northwest view. All four views are in the book. Beautiful colorized view, and you can see the two paths leading up there, and that would be where the sally port is, or the entrance. You can see the two trees that were left standing, and if you look hard, you can see observation posts up in the trees. Huge flag flying there. And then in the middle is the timber citadel or stockade in the center of the fort, the place of last resort. And then over here is a casemate covered with railroad iron, and having one of those guns in a 30-pounder Parrott rifle can fire a 32-pound shell 2 miles. I'm going to show you this next picture, which is I took recently of Fort Negley. And you can see how the fort kind of melds into the hilltop there, St. Cloud Hill. And I just wanted to show you that because this is an exaggerated sketch. It's showing the elevation of the stonework. It's exaggerating that quite a bit, I guess, probably just to show the stonework. Here is 1930s, the Great Depression. This is the WPA project where they basically rebuilt the fort. Half of the fort that you see today is what these guys rebuilt in the 1930s, and they did a very good job. This obviously is a posed picture, but no, they did a very good job of reconstructing it. Here's an aerial view from the 1930s, and you can see that they reconstructed the timber stockade in the middle there with the turrets on each corner, and then they also reconstructed timber works in the bastion. There's 2 bastions, and there's 4 timber works in each bastion. And you can see the light spots where they quarried stone to do the reconstruction. They also built the entrance gate there, which is kind of the signature of Fort Negley. Of course, right next to that is the visitor center these days. And here's the ballpark, baseball park. That site has had ball fields on it, and then actually had the modern Greer Stadium on it until they moved it downtown. And then, let's move on here. That's, fast forward 30 years, that's the same site. There's a fort in there somewhere. It's a little overgrown, as you can see. You can still see the stone gate down there and still see the ball field. Of course, nowadays, many of those trees have been cut down. You're not supposed to cut down trees, but they did it anyway. Here's some drone aerial photography courtesy of Bob Henderson. He did this in March of 2022, last year. We're going to circle the fort real quickly and just give you an aerial view of what it looks like. And of course, here you can see the 2 paths up to the sally port. You can see the star structure of it. You can see the elevation of the trees inside. And we're just going to keep going around in a counterclockwise motion. You see this orange object there, that is the guitar scoreboard rescued from Fort Greer. They're using it at another development there. Continue around, see the other part of the star structure, These shots show again how it melds into the hill, but it also shows the changes in elevation. And it's quite an elevated hill in an elevated position. And of course now we're seeing in the background the ever-changing skyline of modern Nashville. Now we're seeing the bastions. You can see these little tunnels that go through the bastions. I always thought they had artillery there, but the bastions are just for infantry. And they have tunnels running from them so that the soldiers won't be exposed to enemy fire. Continue around. And again, you can see the beautiful stonework here, but you can also see little areas that have been blown out, hydraulic blowouts. And that's what they're trying to prevent. And also you can see right down here 2 people who can't read signs and are sitting on the stoneworks, talking, I guess, on their cell phone. And that is our aerial tour of Fort Negley. And you can't quite see it, but I won't get into that. This is Captain James St. Clair Morton. He was the engineering genius behind Fort Negley. He was a native of Philadelphia, the son of renowned physician Dr. Samuel Morton of Philadelphia, who was the founder of craniometry, which is the measurement of human skulls. He went all around the world and collected human skulls from different races and societies and so forth. He was also the founder of scientific racism, which was the belief that humans have several different species based on the size of their craniums. There's little evidence that this rubbed off on his son, although James was not an abolitionist by any means. He attended the University of Pennsylvania, MIT, and graduated second in his class at West Point in 1851. An intelligent yet quirky individual, Morton has been described as dutiful, outspoken, confrontational, energetic, brash, opinionated, meticulous, and merciless. He was a student of the West Point professor Dennis Hart Mahan, and he challenged the current notion that forts should be made out of brick and masonry. He said that earthen forts would withstand modern rifled artillery a whole lot better than stoneworks, and he was right. Ironically, his most famous work, Fort Negley, was built out of stone due to the rocky terrain. The design of Fort Negley is unlike that of any major fort in the world, as it combines the star features with the bastion features. And here you can see the redans inside and the rectangular stockade. Those are cisterns in the middle, revetments and turrets on the corner. Quite elaborate fort. It's very likely that Negley had this fort designed before he ever came to Nashville. Fort's named for General Negley, who was the provost marshal and commander of federal forces in Nashville at the time. It was later renamed Fort Harker in honor of Brigadier General Charles Harker, who was killed at the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain in July of 1864. For some reason, the new name did not stick, and that's the same way with all the other forts. Here is General Negley. He was a native of Pennsylvania also. He was heavy-set, had twinkling eyes, cherubic face, and he cared deeply for his soldiers. He dropped out of college at age 19 to fight in the Mexican War with the 1st Pennsylvania, but his first love was gardening. He was a brilliant horticulturalist. And I'm reading from a newspaper account. When in the field of war, his leisure hours were devoted to the study of various fruits, flowers, and shrubs in which the southern fields and woods abounded. Many a march, long, tedious, exhausting, has been rendered delightful to his staff by his interesting descriptive illustrations of the hidden beauties and virtues